The night was cool, and the gentle breeze made the leaves of the trees dance. My friends and I were leaning against the wall of an abandoned building, discussing the mansion that everyone said was haunted. "Oh, that's just talk," I asserted, trying to show that I wasn't scared. "What could happen? It's just an old house full of junk." "Ethan, are you really going to go in there?" Lucas, one of my friends, asked with a tone of concern in his voice. He had always been the most cautious of the group. "What if it's true? What if someone is inside?" "Someone? What do you mean? Do you think a ghost is going to attack me?" I laughed, but the truth was that there was a growing adrenaline in my chest. The idea of breaking into that abandoned mansion sparked a curiosity I couldn't ignore. "I bet there's something valuable in there," I said, looking at the others. "Just a little courage, and we'll come out rich." The look of excitement on their faces encouraged me. After a few minutes of conversation, I decided that I couldn't let this opportunity slip away. With one last wave, I said goodbye to them, promising that I would return soon with something incredible. I walked towards the mansion, the sound of my footsteps echoing on the empty sidewalk. When I arrived, the gate creaked as if warning me not to enter. I pushed the door, which opened with a creak, revealing a dark and dusty interior. The walls were peeling, and the furniture seemed to have been forgotten by time. The smell of mold and dampness invaded my nostrils, and a shiver ran down my spine. "It's just an old house," I repeated to myself, trying to shake off the feeling of discomfort. As I walked down the hallway, each step I took seemed to echo in an oppressive silence. I looked around, searching for something worthwhile. The place was filled with old objects, but nothing caught my attention. That's when I heard a noise coming from upstairs. My heart raced. What could it be? Maybe a cat, I thought, trying to convince myself. But curiosity was stronger than fear. I climbed the stairs, feeling the creak of the wooden step beneath my feet. At the top, I saw a door ajar. The sound seemed to be coming from there. "I'll just take a look," I murmured to myself, slowly pushing the door open. What I would find on the other side would change everything. I pushed the door open cautiously, and as I entered, the smell of mold and dampness hit me hard. In the dim light, I saw an old man chained to a bed. His eyes were filled with despair, but at the same time, there was a spark of wisdom that left me paralyzed. You shouldn't be here," he whispered, his hoarse voice almost a lament. I was just looking for something," I managed to say, my voice faltering. "What was I doing there? Who was that man? Something?" Harold smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "What you seek is much more than a simple object." I felt a chill in my stomach. The chains binding him were heavy, and the anguish in his gaze made me hesitate. I could have simply left, but something held me back. Curiosity and an inexplicable impulse kept me rooted to the spot. "Who did this to you?" I asked, not sure if I really wanted to hear the answer. "A cruel man," he replied, his eyes drifting into memories. "He locked me here, so I would speak of a treasure. A treasure that is not just gold, but something far more precious." "Treasure?" I repeated, my mind spinning between disbelief and greed. "What do you know about this?" Harold looked at me, his expression turning serious. "The former owner of the mansion tortured me. He thought I knew where it was hidden, but what he really wanted," he hesitated, as if weighing his words, "was the knowledge I kept." I felt a mix of compassion and fear. A man so old and frail, trapped like an animal. I could help him, but how? "I can help you," I finally declared, determination igniting within me. "But I need to find the key to these chains." Harold nodded, hope beginning to shine in his tired eyes. "We need to be clever, Ethan. If the man comes back and catches us, a noise from downstairs made me shudder. Heavy footsteps approached, and my heart raced. "Quick," I whispered, heading towards the door. "Where can we hide?" "Behind the curtain," he indicated. I ran and hid, adrenaline pulsing through my veins. The old man shrank back, his eyes fixed on the door. I was about to discover that the mansion held secrets far deeper than I could ever imagine. My heart raced in my chest as the man entered the room, the dim light of the lantern he carried illuminating his face. I recognized him immediately. It was Mr. Morgan, an acquaintance of my mother, someone who always seemed to have a penetrating gaze capable of uncovering secrets. He approached the bed where Harold was trapped, and I shrank back into the shadows, barely able to breathe. "You should never have been freed, old fool," he said, his voice low but filled with contempt. "The inheritance was mine, and you ruined everything." The word inheritance echoed in my mind, like a bell tolling on a cloudy day. Inheritance? I murmured to myself, trying to piece together the puzzle. What did he mean by that? I looked at Harold, who gave me a worried glance, as if he knew the situation was about to escalate. "You don't understand, Mr. Morgan," Harold replied, his voice trembling but firm. "What you did to me was a crime, but the truth always comes to light. The treasure you seek is not what you imagine." The man laughed, a cold and joyless sound. "You talk about treasure as if it's something society values. What I want is what is rightfully mine. And you, Harold, are nothing more than an obstacle." As he turned to leave, my instinct to protect Harold ignited. "Wait!" I shouted without thinking. He stopped and looked back at me, surprised. "Who's there?" His voice was like poison, cutting through the air. "I'm Ethan," I answered, stepping out of the shadows with a mix of courage and desperation. "What do you want with Harold?" Mr. Morgan's gaze became threatening. "You should stay out of this, kid. You don't know who you're dealing with." "But I know you're doing something terrible," I asserted, feeling adrenaline coursing through my body. "Leave him alone." He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "You're getting involved in matters you don't understand, Ethan. But for some reason, I'll let him live for now." With that, he left the room, the door slamming shut behind him. I could barely process what I had just heard. The word inheritance echoed in my mind like a mantra. What did Harold know? What was hidden in that mansion? A growing determination began to take hold of me. "Ethan," Harold whispered. The weakness in his voice brought me back to reality. "You need to know more about this. Don't let him find out you're here." "I promise I'll come back with the key," I said, looking into Harold's eyes. "I won't leave you here." The old man nodded slowly, but the worry in his gaze made me feel that time was of the essence. I left the room, determined to uncover the truth about the inheritance and what really happened in that mansion. The night was silent, except for the sound of my own footsteps echoing on the dusty floor of the mansion. Darkness enveloped everything around me, and the only light illuminating my path came from a lantern I had found in one of the rooms. Anxiety tightened my chest, but the determination to free Harold pushed me forward. I needed to find the key. As I explored the rooms, I couldn't help but notice the walls covered in mold and the spider webs that had accumulated in the corners. Each room I opened seemed to tell a story of pain and despair, and my curiosity mixed with a growing fear. Finally, in a room filled with broken furniture, I found an old box. With some effort, I managed to open it, and to my surprise, inside was a pile of yellow documents. Flipping through the pages, I managed to piece together the story of the mansion. Harold was the guardian of the treasure, I thought, as I read about an old owner who had imprisoned the old man to steal his knowledge. My heart raced. What I thought was a simple robbery now revealed itself as a plot of betrayal and vengeance. I was not just trying to save a man, but also to rescue a piece of history that had been buried under layers of lies. I need to go back to him, I murmured to myself, the urgency to free Harold pulsing through my veins. When I reached the room where he was imprisoned, my stomach twisted at the sight of his critical condition. He looked visibly weaker, and the chains seemed to tighten more with each passing day. "Harold," I shouted, rushing to him. "I found documents. They talk about you, about the mansion." He lifted his head with effort, his eyes filled with expectation. "Ethan, do you know what this means?" "Yes," I replied, breathless. "You are the guardian. We need you free for the truth to come to light." "But time is running out," he said, his voice weak. "You need to be quick. The key. Where is the key?" "I'm almost there, I promise." A knot formed in my throat as I looked at him, realizing the gravity of the situation. His life depended on me, and the responsibility weighed like an anchor. It wasn't just a theft, it was a fight for justice. "Don't give up," he murmured, and I knew I had to act fast. What I truly wanted, besides freeing him, was to understand what all of this meant for me. The life I had been living until then no longer made sense. I needed to choose a different path, and Harold was the key to that. I was panting, my heart racing as I ran down the dark corridor of the mansion. The key I had found was sweating in my hand, and the urgency to free Harold propelled me forward. The weight of the chains seemed to echo in my mind, reminding me of what was at stake. I could barely contain a rush of adrenaline when I heard heavy footsteps approaching. The mysterious man was back. "Shit, Ethan, think," I whispered to myself, gripping the key tightly. The door to Harold's room was only a few steps away, but the shadow approaching threatened everything. I hid behind a cabinet, my breath held as the man entered the hallway. He was speaking on his cell phone, his voice low and menacing. "Yes, I'll handle this personally. I can't let him find out," he said, and I realized he was talking about me. Fear mixed with anger surged within me. How dare he threaten me? When the door to the room opened and he stepped inside, I knew it was my chance. With a surge of courage, I emerged from my hiding place and headed for the door. "Harold," I called, barely managing to control the tremble in my voice. "I found the key. Ethan, you need to be quick. He can't find out you're here." Harold's voice was a desperate whisper, but there was a fire in his eyes that encouraged me. With a determined movement, I unlocked the chains, and just as Harold was about to be freed completely, the man appeared in the doorway, his eyes blazing with fury. "What are you doing here, kid? I found out everything. You won't be able to escape this." Harold isn't a prisoner. He's the guardian of the truth about this house. I didn't know where my bravery came from, but the words poured out of me like a battle cry. The man made a contemptuous expression. "You have no idea what you're getting into. This isn't your fight." He advanced toward me, but Harold, still restrained, lifted his head and shouted, "Ethan, use what you know." "He's afraid." Those words struck me. A risky plan began to form in my mind. As the man approached, I prepared a distraction. "You can't intimidate me. The truth about you will be exposed," I shouted, and he hesitated, confused. At that moment, Harold pulled on the chains with all his might, creating a thunderous noise. The man turned to him, and I seized the opportunity. I ran for the exit, my heart pounding in my throat, the adrenaline making me feel alive. I didn't know if I would be able to escape, but the urge to save Harold guided me. The door was getting closer, and freedom shone like a beacon in the darkness. The cool night breeze caressed my face as Harold and I distanced ourselves from the mansion. The weight of recent events still pulsed in my veins, but the adrenaline began to dissipate, giving way to a feeling of relief and freedom. The old man walked with difficulty, but the determination in his eyes was undeniable. "You did the right thing, Ethan," he said, his voice hoarse but firm. "You've helped free not just me, but everyone who has suffered in that man's grasp." "I just couldn't stay still while you were suffering," I replied, trying to understand what had happened to me. It was like I was trapped in the same prison. Harold smiled sadly. "Sometimes the true prison is the one we create in our minds. You have the power to change your story, just as I will have the chance to rewrite mine." As we walked, he began to tell me about the treasure he guarded. "It's not just gold and jewels, Ethan. The true treasure is knowledge. The history of my family is intertwined with this mansion, and I am the only one who can preserve it." "History?" I asked, intrigued. "What history?" "A legacy of bravery and betrayal. My ancestor was one of the first to inhabit this house. He hid riches and secrets that the current owner desires for himself. And I, as the guardian, should protect that." As Harold's words echoed in my mind, I realized there was much more at stake than just valuable objects. My heart raced at the thought that, alongside Harold, I could play a vital role in the fight against injustices. "We need to expose this man," I declared, gripping Harold's hand tightly. "He can't keep hurting others. Together, we can do something great." "Yes, Ethan," he said, a renewed spark in his eyes. "We need to gather the evidence. We have to show the world who he really is." I agreed, feeling a wave of excitement and purpose. I was no longer the boy seeking an easy life through petty crimes. Now I was fighting for something greater, for someone who not only taught me about courage, but who had also become a friend. The walk to the city felt lighter, our steps firm. When we arrived, the street lights illuminated our faces, and I realized I had left behind not only the mansion, but also the mistakes of my past. The future lay before me, filled with possibilities. "I promise I won't leave you alone in this," I assured Harold as we prepared to face the mysterious man. "Together, we will make a difference." And so, with a new purpose and an unbreakable friendship, we moved forward, ready to face the challenges ahead, determined to turn the past into a bright future.